Wyoming Territory, December 1866. Crazy Horse and a small band of Lakota warriors have lured a column of 80 soldiers away from Fort Kearny down a distant slope called Lodge Trail Ridge. Hidden among the trees, 2,000 Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors waiting in ambush. Army Captain William Fetterman has led his men into a trap from which there is virtually no hope of escape.
Fetterman's leading his men down off the hill, and they get out into that opening area, and then all of a sudden, here comes this swarm. He realized he was in trouble, so he tried to turn his men around and head back to the fort. And basically, he got as far as a ridge that's very strewn with rocks, and that's where they made their defense.
Some of Fetterman's soldiers have repeating rifles, like the Henry. This gun held up to 15 self-contained rounds at once, which could be chambered and readied for firing with the simple ratcheting of a lever beneath the hand grip. But most are armed only with Civil War-era muzzle loaders, rifles that must be reloaded after every shot and can only fire 2 to 3 rounds per minute. Those 2 to 3 rounds were no match at all for 10,000 razor-tipped arrows slicing through the air toward the soldiers from every direction.
In fact, there were so many arrows where we actually ended up hitting some of our own people.
Fetterman and all 80 of his soldiers quickly fall in a hail of deadly missiles.
80 men, 2,000 warriors, it didn't take much long. It was about 30 minutes, and the thing was over.
The disaster would go down in Western lore as the Fetterman Massacre. But in the minds of the Lakota and their allies, it was the first major victory in a war to take back their hunting grounds. The courage of Crazy Horse and his team of decoys paid off. Red Cloud's unified ambush strategy was also a winner. After the battle, adrenaline-charged warriors leapt on the soldiers' bodies, mutilating them in a variety of nasty ways. And it wasn't just to disgrace the dead soldiers.
It was so they wouldn't be a whole body in the afterlife in order to track them down. If they had no hands, they couldn't grab them. If they had no feet, they couldn't come after them. If they had no eyes, they were blind. They couldn't see. They would always be wandering around looking for their body parts, and there would be no threat.
In the minds of the Plains warriors, these spiritual considerations could not be ignored. Religion played an important role in their everyday lives. In fact, religion often dictated which technologies a warrior relied on most heavily. Each Plains tribesman nurtured what he referred to as his medicine. Medicine is a Native American's personal power, a combination, you might say, of luck, karma, personal judgment, courage, and charisma. And it was usually embodied in a particular animal or object, revealed to the warrior in a dream or vision.
Every warrior walked his own path. If he had a vision, he would go to a Wachachawakan or holy man, or medicine man, and have that vision interpreted. He may see an animal, he may see an object, and that would be considered one's own medicine. You would utilize this medicine going into battle. The belief was that if you held to your visions or you held to your medicine, that it would carry you through.
Images from a warrior's vision often decorated the circular rawhide shield he carried into combat. The warrior believed the power of the painted symbols would help protect him from enemy arrows and bullets. Of course, creating a medicine shield required paint technology.
War paint in itself, it was basically came from minerals. It would be ground down into very, very fine powder. And then it was usually mixed with a bear grease or a fat grease. Black came from burnt charcoal. White was from white clay. For blue, they actually used duck manure. Duck manure, when it comes out, it's blue. So they would take it, dry it into a fine powder. That was put in the water, and of course it became its blue color.
The paint went on smooth, like water off a duck's. Never mind.
A warrior's vision also dictated the way he dressed and painted himself for battle. This was especially notable in the case of Crazy Horse and his vision.
His was of a fractious horse with a great warrior in the sky, being pelted by hailstorms with lightning bolts. And this he took as his particular strong medicine, something that he would emulate.
To harness the spiritual power revealed to him by his vision, Crazy Horse would later ready himself for battle by painting a lightning bolt on his face and dotting his horse, and sometimes his own body, with white hail spots. As it turned out, Crazy Horse was never struck by a bullet or an arrow in a major battle.
Nothing crazy about that.
War paint not only depicted medicine symbols, it also acted as a weapon in a sort of psychological warfare.
You can see that paint from a long distance, and that told a lot about that particular warrior, what society he might belong to, what his accomplishments were. And if you had a particular society that was known for fierce fighters, well, then that played a psychological effect. And if you can see that that person had a lot of coup marks on his horse, you know, he was a particular fierce warrior.
The intimidating psychological effect of war paint was not lost on another breed of warrior more than a half-century later. During World War II, the men of the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Unit striped their faces with war paint to look fearsome for the D-Day landing. Vision medicine not only determined how a Native American painted himself for the fight, it also strongly influenced personal ritual, and sometimes it made things taboo for a warrior. One such belief may have been the undoing of a great Cheyenne fighter named Roman Nose.
Roman Nose was a big, strapping Cheyenne warrior, unusually large for an Indian. He would always try to be in the forefront of any kind of attack. Despite this large size, he was described as a magnificent horseman. So in all ways, although he was not a chief, he led by example as one of the great warriors of the Cheyenne.
Roman Nose always wore a flowing headdress into battle. He believed the war bonnet possessed a special medicine that made him bulletproof, but its power only worked as long as he avoided certain things. One taboo was that he should never take a wife. Another was that he should never eat a meal that had been prepared or served with metal utensils. September 17, 1868, a combined Lakota and Cheyenne camp on the Arikari River in eastern Colorado gets word the U.S. cavalry has been spotted downstream. Warriors paint their bodies, gather their best weapons and ponies, and prepare to fight. Roman Nose is among them. As he readies himself, he eats a small meal.
Unbeknownst to him, a squaw had stabbed some food to serve to him with an iron fork. He didn't know it. Before he knew it, he ate some of the food. Well, now this was very bad medicine.
Before he leaves to join the battle, Roman Nose learns that he has violated a sacred taboo, and there's no time to perform the elaborate purification rituals required to restore his power. The war party makes its way downstream and attacks the cavalry unit. In successive charges, some 700 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors assault what turns out to be just a few Army officers leading some 57 civilian scouts. Despite the estimated 5,000 arrows ripping through the air, the small group of white officers and scouts is able to turn to one of the most important technological advancements in the West, the Spencer rifle.
They were 7-shot lever-action repeaters. They weren't much for distance, and they didn't carry that big a wallop, but they were accurate, and they could fire fairly rapidly. Dozens of Indians went down.
Roman Nose observed the action from a bluff and rear, feeling vulnerable.
And it wasn't until one warrior came back and chastised him for hiding out back and not going and fighting in front that Roman Nose went into battle.
Roman Nose inspires the warriors as he leads a ferocious charge. As the great Cheyenne reaches the enemy, a trooper hidden in the grass blasts him in the back at nearly point-blank range. The death of Roman Nose deflated the warrior attack, and the soldiers were able to hang on until help could arrive. But before the epic saga of the West was finished, Native Americans would get their hands on technology that would spell the doom of thousands of less fortunate white invaders of the Great Plains.